Let's talk about lists. A list is just as the name implies. It is a list. Any list, like a list of names, a list of numbers, a list in Python is pretty much like any other list. It is basically a collection of items which have an order so that you know what is the first element in the list, what is the second element in the list, and so on. A list is a type of variable, which means that when you assign a value to the variable, you can assign a list. What are things that we can do with lists? You can create lists. You can do things with specific items of a list. So you can refer to specific items in the list. You can insert items into a list at a specific position. You could remove items from a list, and you can do things with every item on a list. This is exactly where loops will come in. When you want to do something to every item on a list. You could also check what is the size of the list. How many elements does the list have? It's not a very exciting list, but there you have it. These are all the things that you could do with lists in Python. Here's how you can create a list. Just take a list of elements and enclose them in square brackets. That is the key. Then separate the elements of the list with commas. Now, the list can have any type of elements. So you could have a decimal or a float, you could have an integer and a string, all in one list. By using the equals sign, we have assigned this list to the variable list_var. So list_var is a variable whose value is now this list, which contains 3.14, 25 and the name Vittal. So in Python, a list starts and ends with square brackets. Elements in the list are separated by commas, and you can have any type of elements in the same list. You need not have only strings or only numbers in the list. You can combine different types of elements into the same list. You could even have a list of lists. That is a list in which an element is also a list. For this, you need a way to refer to a specific item of the list. Say you want to refer to the first item in the list or to the second item in the list. This can be done by using the index of the item in the list. The index will be enclosed in square brackets, and remember that the index in Python starts from 0. So list_var square brackets 0 gives the first item of our list. So if you try to print list_var square brackets 0, it will print 3.14. Similarly, list_var square brackets 1 will give the second item of our list. It will print the number 25 when you try to print list_var square brackets 1. Len of list_var -1, if you put this inside the square brackets, this will give you the last element of the list. So in this case, len of list_var -1 will actually be the number 2, and it will be giving you the last element of the list. Len of list_var returns the number of elements in the list. Len of list_var will give you 3 in this case. So list_var 0 will give you 3.14, which is the first element of the list. List_var 1 will give you 25, and list_var 2, which we get by using len of list_var -1, will give us the element Vittal. The next thing you can do is to insert an element into a list. There are a bunch of different ways in which you can do this, and we'll go through each one of them. You can insert an element at the very end of the list. So you can add a 4th element to list_var by using the function append. Here's how you can use the function append. You'll say list_var dot append, and within the brackets, you will add the new element of the list. So this will add an element to the end of a list. Insert is a way to add an element at a specific position in the list. So if you say listvar.insert 0, comma new first element of list, it will add this string new first element of list at the first position in the list. On a side note, let's talk about the indexing operator. That is the technical term for the square brackets. So within the square brackets, if you give two numbers separated by a colon, for example, 1 to 4, that's how you read it, from 1 to 4, this will return a new list which will have 4 elements, which are the second, third, fourth, and fifth elements of listvar. So it will return the items indexed 1 through 4 as a list. If you omit the second number and just say 1 colon, this will give you all the elements of the original list starting from item 1 onwards. So it will just drop the elements before item 1 and give you all the elements of the list from there onwards. Similarly, if you omit the number before the colon instead and give a number after the colon, the result will be a list which will run from the beginning of the original list to the number that is specified. So it will give you the beginning of the list to the item number 4. Okay, now we know how to insert elements into a list and how to refer to specific items in a list. Let's look at how we can remove elements from a list. There are 3 ways to do this. Now, instead of me telling you what they are, why don't we Google online for it? Googling online for questions is really a great way to learn coding. Whenever you have a question about something and you want to know how to code it, just try Googling it. This is really good if you know what you want to do and you just want to know how to do it. So just Google Python remove list element and voila, we have a solution. There are 3 different ways to do it. You can use remove to remove an element which matches a particular value. You can use del to remove an element at a specific position in the list. And you can use pop to remove the last element of a list, and it will also tell you what the last element of that list is. You can also do things to each item on a list or iterate through each item on a list. For this, you can use something like for loops. Now, loops are really interesting and we'll get to them in the next class. Everything in life is a list. Strings are lists of characters. Let's say you have a variable called SumString to which you've assigned the string SumString. This is equivalent to having a list of characters. Each of the characters in the string SumString. It actually means that you can do a lot of the things that we just talked about, refer to specific items in this list or specific characters in the string using the same way that we did it for lists. So all the things like adding an element to a list or iterating through items in a list, all of this can be done with a string as well.